Welcome to this Linux channel, and this is a video to talk about a Linux distro or Linux distribution which is called Zorin OS. And if you are a fan of James Bond, the first time I saw the name always reminds me of that episode of James Bond from the 80s with Zorin. Basically, the Linux distro is very nice, and of course I have chosen this one because it is part of an article that I actually talked about on this channel, where we take a look at Linux for beginners, if you want. You know, Linux is not for the faint of heart necessarily, but you know what? If you're not a power user, you can actually use Linux quite easily today. And Zorin OS, this is, by the way, Zorin Core 12, which is the latest version. There are several different versions. This is the Core, so basically it's called Zorin OS 12 Core. I will post the link to where you can get it in the description below the video. Just be careful. You can get the Core OS for free. You just have to put 0 when it asks for a donation. That's the little tricky part where you're not sure what you could do. There is a premium version, but you know what? I don't really fall much for paying anything for Linux distros, so just get Zorin OS 12 Core. It's available in 32 and 64 bits version, and the install process is very simple. So simple, in fact, that if you know how to install Windows, you know how to install this operating system. It just works great. It's easy to install. Of course, you can dual boot if you have a Windows machine. It will ask you, do you want me to, put myself alongside Windows? But the good news is that if you want to try it out without having to install, it will actually ask you, try Zorin OS at the beginning. Now, one little thing that is maybe a little scary at first when you try it, well, not scary, but you're kind of, is it working, is it not? On this machine, and I don't know if it's on every machine, there's a waiting time where you see the Zorin logo in a black screen. And it was really long before it did anything. So if you think it's frozen or it's maybe not doing anything, it's actually maybe doing something. It's just that you haven't really, just have to wait. Now this is on an older Core 2 Duo machine. So anything Core 2 Duo or later, Core i3, i5, will probably have this working. It's a pretty smooth, pretty slick operating system. It is quite fast even on older machines. So basically, Zorin OS is a variation of a very well-known operating system or Linux distro, which is Ubuntu. So it has the same basic underlying code as Ubuntu, and version 16. So it also has the desktop that is based on GNOME 3.18. And so this is the mashup or the mix-up of the different things that make up a Linux distro, from the basics to what you see here, a desktop in an operating system. For a Windows user, you're not lost that much with this distro because, okay, the start button is the Zorin icon on the bottom left, but it does have a pretty simple start menu. You can search for apps, or you can actually go into the different apps that have, for example, if you're looking for productivity stuff or office stuff, you just click and it brings you, the list of all the apps that are here. So if you want to do some, for example, some word processing, you got, LibreOffice installed. So this is nice because it has all the basic functionalities pre-installed that are very, very cool, and what most people will probably be using on their PC. So it's nice because even for somebody that doesn't know that much about the Linux distro, this actually behaves so much like Windows that it's very easy to actually use. You got a taskbar, you got a desktop, you got a start button. It's very, very interesting how the similarities with Windows are, the right click, left click with the context menus and everything. It includes a browser which is Chromium, and Chromium is basically Google Chrome at its basics. It's the core of, Chromium is what makes the core of Chrome browser, and it behaves totally like Google Chrome. What's cool about that, and it's the fact that you not only have a cool browser, but because it behaves and is like Chrome, you can actually log in with your credentials for Chrome, and basically you'll have your toolbar, you'll have your favorites if you are a Gmail user, and you have all your favorites and all your preferences in Chrome in one machine. They all will actually come back here, and actually you'll have access to all of your favorites, and even your settings will be moved along, which is really, really nice. So it makes it, and it makes it feel like it's easy to understand and work with. If you are looking for a little more modern tools, there's of course pretty much every software for the basic tools that you might want. So of course, if you look at the different sections like internet, you have Geary. Geary is an email client. It's a little bit like using Windows Mail if you want, but it's made here. Geary is there. Of course, the Chromium web browser is available. Also, you have the possibility to back up. So there's utilities that let you back up your systems. You can create backups of all kinds easily. It's very, very easy to use. There's, of course, compatibility with pretty much everything through the web. So even if you're, using a great example, I use OneNote. You can use Chromium, go on your OneNote, and you will have access to these notes that you might have shared through a Windows machine, for example. The operating system is pretty slick. It uses around 5-6 gigabytes of disk space once installed, and it works really, really well with, if you have a machine that has only 1 or 2 gigabytes, this distro will actually work not too bad, for a very simple reason. It takes about 600 to 700 megabytes of RAM when it's actually working. So it is quite small, and that's pretty cool because you might want to use it on an older machine that, maybe has lost its luster with a Windows operating system, but will work fine with this. Apart from that, it's so easy to use and so easy to actually, go into, and the different, the control panel equivalent is here. You see, it's really, feels like Windows, but it's not. It's different. Of course, being a Linux distro, it doesn't technically run Windows software, although within this you've got Wine, which is a Windows emulation within Linux. So Wine is pre-installed, and you can actually choose what version of Windows you want it to operate with and work. And I haven't checked that a lot yet, but it's very, very interesting. It has the basic functionalities of, a Windows version. Once again, like I say, you can try it out, and that's the cool thing, is once you plug that USB thumb drive, once you have actually create that USB, bootable USB, what happens is you can actually try it without even touching anything on your hard drive, and that's the coolest thing. So the first option, actually, when you boot, the first one that is already selected is try Zorin OS. And if you really like it, then you can actually choose the second option, which is simply to install Zorin OS. Once again, alongside Windows, or wipe out the drive. It's a very easy install. It's a pretty fast install also, and it's really, really neat operating system, I've got to say. And really been enjoying using Zorin OS 12 core. And so if you want to try it out, the link to this OS is in the description below the video. And of course, we will be continuing our quest to see what types of Distro Linux is interesting. Once I've actually done the trials of all of them, I will probably do some kind of a countdown of the 5 or 10 best Linux distros from my point of view, as I will be, of course, wiping the drive and reinstalling different distros on this machine. Hopefully Next time we'll have the screen recorder working. Unfortunately it didn't, so I'm actually recording with a camera, which is not the best of options, and I'm really sorry for that. But apart from that, you know, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. One last thing, of course, if you're wondering, there's, you know, like I said, your email client, which is Geary, but you also have, and that is pretty cool, a file explorer, just like in Windows, you know. I mean, that's why I say it's really kind of easy distro to work with. I mean, you've got File Explorer, you got your, you know, Documents folder, Music folder, Pictures, everything is there. It resembles, you know, really the different, you know, sides of Windows in the Linux distro. I think they kind of, you know, wanted to really create a similarity to make it easy to work with. Also, you have available, which is very interesting, a kind of a, you know, a store, if you want, a Linux store, if you want, and which is called Software simply. And here you have, of course, a list of all sorts of software and apps. Now I haven't loaded that yet, that's why it's blank. But once you've actually loaded and let it, you know, go through a few times, you'll see all the apps and the things are going to appear here. So it's like an app store, a little bit like the Windows Store, so you can actually, you know, check categories and check the different apps that come from these categories and see if there's something that might be interesting to you. Like I said, I haven't run it yet, so it's still loading like the pictures and stuff that I needed. I should have done this a little earlier. It's actually also doing some updates here from what I see with my different apps. So anyways, it's oh, whoops, it's a went too fast here. It's a nice distro, and in the fact that you have a store to install apps, like I just shown you, also helps you a lot because it makes it easy to have new software pre-installed. One of the biggest complaints of any Linux distro is the fact that it's very complex to install software. Sometimes you have to use the terminal to do things like that. Well, here you've got easy store-like things, and as you see, for example, at the top you can have Firefox as web browser and things like that. You just click, it updates the different apps from your system also, and so if you have apps, it's really a little bit like using really like using the Windows Store if you want. And the choice of apps is quite interesting also. So whatever you want to choose, and you see here the categories on the left side. If you want to choose astronomy software, here we go, Stellarium, that we are checking out for Windows the other day. Well, it's available here for Zorin OS, as you see. You just click the install button, everything installs by itself. One thing that you just need to be to know is that every time there are some changes to the system, you need to enter the core password that you will be entering at the first time you install Zorin OS. But it's really for major changes, and you can change all the options and say, you know, don't bother me with this or that, and have it, you know, more like a Windows operating system where almost nothing is actually installed or, you know, asked for. So Zorin OS, check the description below the video. You can download it there. You can, of course, use the tool to create the USB thumb drive, and with that you'll be able to boot and try it out without even installing it. And if you really like it, you know, these are nice if you have a computer lying around that's not doing anything, or, you know, maybe you got an old Windows version on it, like, you know, some Windows Vista or something. Why not transfer or change that machine into a Linux machine and see how it works? The last thing that I would say, the last little word of caution I would say against that is, remember that the older the PC, the higher the chances it might not work successfully. And that's why trying it before installing it is the best thing you can do, and that's the cool thing of Linux distros. You can try it before you even install it. So Zorin OS 12 Core is a great start to a Linux distro for beginners, and a great way to not feel lost, because it resembles Windows in certain points. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe, give us thumbs up, Thank you so much for following us on this channel.